And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, for the next episode of Studio Time, and we're still playing around with the 200E system by Buchla, my Euro modular rack, and right now the new element that is going to get added to this whole experiment of the previous episodes is a 4-track cassette player. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, cassettes that were made in the 70s and early 80s. Beautiful as they are, they're still easy to find, and so it's not a big deal. Actually, to find a recorder like this in immaculate condition is a little harder, but this is the Porta Studio Tascam 246. Back then, I don't even know what the price was, but I know it was very expensive, and in 1984, it's 40 years old. It was like an incredible source to record high-level demos at home, and I used it a lot because one of my best friends, Phil Mills, that I also had a band with, Nerve, he actually had one. So early 80s, he's like, when I just met him, he was kind enough to borrow this to me so I could work on my first demos with synthesizers, guitars, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a blast from the past, you know, to have this thing back in my studio. And how do I want to use this thing? So we've been listening to the things I've been doing with the 200E with the Eurorack modular system. And so I gave like a little performance in the previous episodes, like all the colors you can make. Now I want to add 2 more colors to it, and that's the 4-track recorder and the rack over here, but I'll get to the rack over there in a second. First, the cassette player. What I did is, as you can see, there's some blue cables going into this cassette recorder, the multi-track recorder 4-track on cassette, and we have here an output that is going to my speakers. And what did I do? I actually jammed on this system 4 different times, and I recorded on 4 different tracks a performance coming from this modular system. So what we're now going to listen to, first we need the cassette, and what does it say on here? And it's the first tape, since I only have this recorder very recent. And here we see Buchla recording tape number 1. So I'm going to take this tape and we're going to take it out. Feels so good, old technology, to have that back in your hands. And we're going to open this door. We're going to slide the cassette in. And now we can press play. So even without sound, I'm just going to play the cassette. And if correct, there we go. We see track number 1, we see track number 2, track number 3, track number 4. Now this cassette player, let me explain every channel to you so the cameraman can get it. You can choose whether you want to play something back from the tape or if you want to listen to an input from a microphone or a line. You have a gain to set up. You have 2 parametric EQs right here. You can send effects 1 and 2 to an external effect send. And here you have your routing system, so you can say, I want this to go to track 1, 2, 3, 4, or in mixing mode to the left or to the right. And here are your pan knobs to mix whatever you have recorded on there. And this is your master output. Actually, for this time period, I'm pressing stop and rewind and go back to the beginning. For that time, this was actually very snazzy technology, especially parametric EQ, so you could pick the frequency and dial it in or take it out. Was usually available on the more fancy mixing desk, and to have that in a 4-track recorder was incredible. Plus, for its time, its recording quality. Now, why would I use this? Wouldn't Cubase sound way better with like a really good interface? Oh yeah, absolutely. But now I can play with the distortion of tape, and I can overdrive the tape input. I can overdrive the tape output. I can use the EQ in a very, very extreme way. But even more so funny, this machine has like a pitch control, how fast the motor is running, so I can slow the recording down or I can speed it up and get really interesting effects. So what I'm now going to play to you is basically me I'm gonna hit play, and I recorded 4 different performances on all the 4 tracks, and I'm just gonna play around with the faders to see if I can get like some interesting a performance out of this. And then after that I will play you what one track is doing and what the other track is doing. Okay, so here we go. I put the master faders up and I'm gonna hit play and we're gonna bring in track number 4 first. Track number 4. Track number 3. Track number 1 and 2, and this is actually a stereo track, so I'm gonna bring this up both at the same time. So it's really nice to hear like the individual tracks that I used to record this. And now I can rewind the tape back. And now I'm just going to play with these things and faders in and out and see if we can create like some interesting little piece of music that then I can record into Cubase and do something else with. For instance, recording it back through the Buchla, using these filters again and go completely overboard with what I just recorded with the tape. The possibilities are endless to create really, really cool sounds. Okay, let's just play it and let's just play with these different faders. Here we go. I'm just going to stop here for a second. I'm just so excited that you could create completely different tones, you know, with a machine like this, with recording just like multiple performance on this, and you get this really nice lo-fi quality coming out of it. And I can record that back in Cubase and then just do something else with it, like for instance route it again, you know, through the system. So what is now really cool about this system is that it is a cassette. So what can you do with the cassette? Well, you can play the tape forward, but you can take the cassette out and turn it around, and now I'm going to put it back. So what used to be track 4 is now track 1. What used to be track 3 is now 2, and what used to be 2 is now 3. But we will hear everything in reversed because it's a tape being turned upside down. And yes, I know, you can do that in Cubase. It's a very simple function. I have a button on my screen that says reverse, and whoop, everything is reversed. But for the sake of creativity, it's so much fun to do it with a tape recorder with its grainy quality and its weird EQs and everything. So let's just play around with what we have right now. Let's see if I'm doing this right. Here we go. So I'm going to rewind a little bit because I want to stay in reverse mode for a second. But you know what I'm now going to do? I'm going to play back the same section, but now I'm going to play with the pitch control. I'm going to turn the pitch control all the way down. So now the tape will be playing slower, which means the tempo will be slower of the pulse, but the tone will also be slower. And this is really interesting to see if we can get more different tones out of this. So let's play it again. And now I'm going to switch this on. So now the tape is going to run way slower. And then we ran out of tape. So I'm going to rewind again because now I'm turning the tempo all the way up to see what comes out of that. Here we go. Let's play that same section again. And we ran out of tape because now the tape is at its end, and obviously I can take the tape out and I can go back to its original position and play it back forward instead of backwards. And so I wanted to show you this because it's a really creative way of making, you know, really cool sounds. And in the past, when I didn't have the budget to do all this what I have right now, I would use 4-track recorders and I would use a sampler to create really complex soundscapes, sample them in the sampler and do it again and do it again. I use this so much on guitars to make really interesting guitar textures where some of the guitars were recorded forward, some of them were recorded backwards. I mixed them together to a new audio track and then do new stuff and just create really complex soundscapes with very simple effects machines. I know now I have all fancy VST plugins and I have this and beautiful modules in the Eurorack, but in the past I would use a simple guitar pedal like a Boss pedal, spring reverb, or an Ibanez chorus or something like that. You know, pedals that were at the time, you know, maybe $80 or $100 or something like that, that were affordable. And since I was already a guitar player having guitar effects, I could combine that really, really well with, you know, a 4-track recorder in combination with the sampler to make really cool soundscapes. And that's what I used a lot on my early records from the late 80s, early 90s, all the way up to the first and second album of Junkie XL in 96 and 99. And from that point on, most of the stuff that I did was with analog synths, but everything was mixed and recorded into Pro Tools or Cubase or Logic, Ableton Live. I used all of them. And I did less with 4-track or less with analog 8-track or 24-track. But since I was working with the Buchla system and the Eurorack, I really wanted to go back to those old experiments that I used to do, and I'm so happy I found this box and I can use it now as a source of color. So that ends the section of the Tascam 246. And now I want to move over to the external effects that I'm using right here. So what are we seeing here? I explained it in the tour of the studio, but basically what you're seeing, and both the racks are the same, so I know the focus of the camera is more on the right rack, but the left rack is identical. So up top we see some jack inputs and outputs. These 4 inputs are coming from my Buchla system. These 4 outputs are, 2 of them are go to the Buchla system, 2 of them are actually going to the Tascam 246 4-track recorder. But before it gets into Cubase, or before it comes out of Cubase, or before it comes into Buchla or out of Buchla, or for that matter, the Eurorack system, we have these modules right here that I can use, but I don't have to use them, but I can. And so I can take the signal coming in into one of these inputs, and I can say I want a tube multi-band compressor on it. For instance, the TubeTech 2MC2B, wonderful sounding multi-band compressor with tubes. Underneath it I have 2 distressors, which have always been one of my favorite pieces of gear. It's made by Empirical Labs. It does very subtle compression that you would find on old tape recorders and old mixing desks, to very aggressive compression with distortion and everything in between. These are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful boxes. Then I have the TubeTech MEC1E. I've got 2 of those here because this is a mono box. And so this allows you to gain the signal, have a tube EQ, and then a compressor after that, and an output. And there are 2 of those, 2 of the distressors because it's mono 2, and the TubeTech is actually a stereo device, so there's 1 of those. So stereo, I can route if I want my signal to all these boxes here before it goes to Cubase, or only 1 of them. So at this point I have only the 710D hooked up, and this is completely being controlled by software. The box on the left here is an X-Patch 32. 32 balanced signals go in, 32 balanced signals go out. And with the software that we see right here, we're going to make a close-up of this later, you basically see a signal path and you can drag whatever you want in that signal path, and that is what you will listen to. So at this point, when I'm playing this little experiment back with the tape recorder, I'm just going to hit play. And I'm going to turn the volume really quiet at this point so I can still talk through it. Now the signal is coming in, and we see here it's going straight to the 710D, which is a really wonderful box made by Universal Audio. It has a gain input. You can choose whether you want a transistor stage or a tube stage, and it has an output. And it also has the ability to do soft compression and soft limiting. It's a really incredible sounding box, and it has 4 channels, and 2 channels are now being used for this. But if I now wanted to, for instance, insert 2 distressors on the same signal path, I'm just gonna switch the recorder off for a second, and I go to my computer and I look at my distressor boxes right here, and I'm gonna drag this over to the first input in Cubase and the second input in Cubase. So if things are correct, I am now pressing play. This will now come into the distressor. I need to turn the volume up for that to happen. And what I did just now, I went for a very, very extreme setting where there was so much compression and distortion with no attack and no release, so very short attack and release, and the gain all the way up of the input, and even the audio path here is the one that's selected that says distortion 3, which is the most insane one. But I can go for a completely different setting. Let's say input level is going to be 3.5. I'm not going to go for a distortion channel. I'm going to go for medium attack, medium release, and I'm going to switch on the button here that says a British mode, which will give us really soft compression on this same signal. I'm rewinding the tape back. Keep in mind though that we did record this section really loud on the tape, so there probably will still be tape distortion, but let's just look how this sounds. Let's switch it back off. So what we just listened to is the setting being very mellow, and you saw like 3 to 4 dB of compression, and so it's a pretty mellow approach. I also just saw that on the first take I had both the boxes on bypass. Stupid me. So I'm just going to go back to the original section, which is distortion 3. Let's see, I'm going to go for aggressive compression here. I'm going to yank the input up quite a lot. I'm going to bring the output down considerably. And I'm not going for the British mode, which will make it very mellow. I'm going for a very fast attack and a very fast release. And now the output is set to 0, so because I'm going to overdrive this thing by quite a lot, let's just see what happens. Okay, if we look at the meters, like this thing is now working like crazy, and we see that we have way more than 1% distortion right now on the output. So let's bring it out. So you get that really, really nice crackling sound of the distressor. There's a reason why it's called the distressor. You can go completely crazy with it. It even has a setting that is called nuke, which pretty much means you're going to destroy the signal absolutely, completely altogether. Okay, so we tried the distressors. Let's move the distressors back to where they were, their original signal path. And now let's grab the MC1A 1 and 2, which are these two blue boxes right here. Okay, so I'm going to set my level a little lower. I don't want actual more distortion than is already on the tape. And let's just experiment a little bit with EQ. So I'm going to select 30 Hertz on the low end. And I'm going to make sure my signal has enough low end and not filtered out. So at this point, I'm going to send to these two boxes what actually is coming out of the tape recorder. Mind you, I did record with distortion on the tape, so there will always be distortion. I just want to make sure that the compressor at this point is out. Okay, so the compressor, we're just focusing on the EQ right now. And I'm going to select the high end as well, around 8 kilohertz. and we're just going to dial that in. So the low end is 30 Hertz and the high end is around 8 kilohertz. Let's just see what signal comes out if we just bring up the faders like gently. I'm going to stop right here, and you can clearly hear when I dialed in that 30 Hertz, like the big bottom end that came in, and when I dialed in the 8 kilohertz, like really nice sizzling sounds came on top of this sound. And now I'm going to play a little bit with the mid-range so you can hear how that sounds. There are many options for the mid-range, so let's play that. So what I just did is the low end was still the same, and the mid frequencies I was dialing it in on various different frequency bands, and then I switched it to cutting that frequency away, which is an option that this box has. You gain the frequency or you cut it. And then I played a little bit more with the high end. So at no means is this a full demonstration video like how incredible all these boxes sound, because there are way better videos for that, because you need actually a really clean signal going in, like a vocal, very well recorded, to see what the actual quality of these things are. So why do I use it? Well, if I'm working with a state machine or I'm working with a modular rack and the System 200E and that system, I use these boxes only to destroy the sound, like in the best possible way. Destruction, as much as possible. Distortion, aggressive EQs, like everything. And these boxes give me such an incredible character because of the tubes that they're made of, and it sounds phenomenal, in my opinion. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that rather listen to, you know, very clean music that find this horrible, but, you know, for movies like Mad Max, Mortal Engines, Godzilla vs. Kong, Justice League, the Snyder Cut, all that distortion that is like in those movies is made with boxes like this or similar boxes. But there's a second use for this whole system. You see, I have two racks, one on the left, one on the right. And that is not that I want more of the same thing. No, it's because I work in quad. And so all my libraries in Cubase and everything that I write and everything that I mix is in quad. So if I'm mixing, I'm using this as a quad setup. So the left would be front, left and right. The right would be left and right in the back speakers. So what would I do? I would take my live strings, live recorded, for instance, in LA at a great scoring stage, or at Air in London, and I would route it through this system, and at that point I'm not using this to destroy the sound. Now I want to enhance the recording. So you work very meticulously with a little bit of dB here, there, maybe give it some air on the top, maybe add a little bit of low end, compress it like a little bit. So everything you do at this point in the mixing stage is very, very subtle, because you don't want to destroy the original audio. You want to enhance it. You want to make it better. So there's two ways I use this, and that's the same for my VST plugins. The two uses are always destruction, sound design, super creative, and the other use is really proper mixing, controlling the levels, adding the nice frequencies to the frequency range that it needs, take frequencies away to make the mix more open. So the two uses for this rack is especially for that. One side destruction and the other side is to make a really proper mix. And that brings us to the end of this episode, and if you have any comments about anything that you saw in the last couple of parts, including the System 200E, the modular, the tape recorder, and these outside boxes with the software program that I'm using, leave your comments below and we'll get to it in a separate video. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.